Today we're talking about one of the most anticipated and already controversial projects in modern TV, the new Harry Potter series. Now, unlike when this show was first announced, we're no longer speculating in the dark. We officially have our main cast, and that's where things get very interesting. So let's start with the big three. HBO has cast Dominic McLaughlin as Harry Potter, Arabella Stanton as Hermione Granger, and Alistair Stout as Ron Weasley. All three are relatively new faces, which, honestly, makes a lot of sense. Because if you think back to the original films, part of what made them work so well is that the actors grew up with the roles. And it looks like the series is aiming to recreate that same long-term journey. But here's where things start to shift from excitement into discourse. Because while the trio casting has been mostly well received, or at least cautiously accepted, the conversation online has really centered around one particular role, Severus Snape. The series has cast Papa Esidu as Snape, and that decision has sparked a lot of debate online. And unfortunately, as tends to happen with big franchise casting these days, some of that discourse has crossed a line. There have been racist remarks directed at the casting choice, and that's just completely unacceptable. Criticism and discussion are one thing, but attacking someone on that level isn't constructive, and it definitely doesn't add anything meaningful to the conversation. Now, to be clear, Esidu is a critically acclaimed actor. From a performance standpoint, a lot of people actually think he could bring something really compelling and layered to the character. But the controversy itself largely comes from how different this interpretation is from both the book's original description and, of course, the iconic portrayal by Alan Rickman. And this is where the conversation gets more complicated. Some fans argue that Snape's appearance, specifically being described a certain way in the books, is part of the character's identity, and changing that alters how people perceive him. Others argue the opposite, that Snape is fundamentally defined by his emotional complexity, his bitterness, his moral ambiguity, not his physical appearance, and that a talented actor can reinterpret the role in a way that still feels authentic, even if it looks different. But there's also another layer that people have brought up, how this casting might change the context of certain storylines. For example, Snape's history with James Potter and the Marauders. Some fans are wondering whether that dynamic will feel different on screen depending on how the show handles it. And that's not necessarily a criticism. It's more of a question about how the adaptation will navigate those nuances. Now, all of this discourse was already bubbling online, but it really exploded after the release of the first trailer. Because now, people aren't just debating casting, they're analyzing the look and feel of the show itself. Some viewers have criticized the color grading and cinematography, saying it looks a bit too muted or generic compared to the distinct visual identity of the original films. Others feel like it leans too heavily into that modern prestige TV aesthetic, rather than capturing the slightly whimsical, storybook tone they associate with Harry Potter. And then there's been conversation around the performance of Harry himself. A few early reactions have said that Dominic McLaughlin doesn't quite have that same immediate spark people remember from Daniel Radcliffe's first appearance. But I do want to pause on that for a second, because it's really important to remember that this is a child actor, at the very beginning of what could be a long journey with this role. Those comparisons are inevitable, sure, but they're also a little unfair this early on. Radcliffe himself grew into the role over time, and a huge part of what made that performance special was watching it evolve across multiple films. So it's probably worth giving this new cast that same space to grow before making final judgments. And this really speaks to a bigger idea about this series as a whole, because this isn't just a remake, it's a reinterpretation. We're getting a version of Harry Potter that's being made in a completely different cultural moment than the early 2000s films. And with that comes different priorities, different sensibilities, and inevitably, different creative choices. At the same time, the show is still promising something fans have wanted for years: a more faithful, long-form adaptation of the books. More time at Hogwarts, more character depth, more of the details that never made it into the films. So in a way, the series is walking a very fine line between staying true to the source material and reimagining it for a new generation. And honestly, that's why the discourse feels so intense right now. Because for a lot of people, Harry Potter isn't just another franchise, it's something they grew up with. So any change, whether it's casting, visuals, or tone, is going to feel personal. But the real question is, will these choices work once we actually see the full series? Because at the end of the day, performances and storytelling matter more than first impressions. So yeah, this is definitely going to be one of the most talked about shows when it drops. But I want to hear from you. What do you think about the new cast, the trailer, and the overall direction of the series? Are you on board or still unsure? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.